I think it's time to come clean and admit that there are some annoyances with my supermoto kit, and I did this as a DIY hack project, so go figure. No major issues or anything like that, but having lived with it for a few months, there are a few things I want to address. Today we're going to do just that. Not only are we going to give this more stopping power, but we're going to fix some much needed alignment issues up front, and as a cherry on top, why not show it all off? We'll start by going over the major flaws in the system, number one being the most obvious. You might remember this, but putting this kit together involved removing the front entirely and replacing it with the rear wheel of a Mototech. In doing so, there was a few problems actually. I'll go over more of those later on, but the major problem was the brake rotor. You see, Mototech, for whatever reason, doesn't share the bolt pattern as the RTR, as the Alpha Pro, or like any other type of pit bike out there. And there's no way that I'm using the Mototech stuff because it's way too small and way too dinky. These are basically mountain bike brakes. They're 180 millimeters in diameter and really thin. In fact, I had to pull this one specifically off of my 60 volt because I already bent it. And I have no idea how I even did that, but if these things are thin enough to be able to bend by accident, then they're probably too thin to actually stop your bike. So I had to make my own rotor to match the stock RTR rotor. Both of these are much thicker and much bigger. They're both 200 millimeters, and because they're thicker, they're stronger, and because they're wider, they have more stopping power. And that's all well and good, but this is a supermoto and front stopping power really matters, so why not go even bigger? So this is my new custom supermoto rotor version 2.0. It's even bigger now, 220 millimeters, and I even added some speed holes on the side here, mostly to detract from the fact that this is a homemade rotor, but also speed holes. It has the word speed in it, so added horsepower, right? This has the same thickness as the RTR rotor. I can't get much thicker than that because it still needs to fit inside the caliper in order to even work, but with 20 millimeters of extra width, it's going to have more stopping power because the bigger the rotor, the stronger the force that's applied on the wheel. But with a bigger rotor comes more hurdles. Because this new one is so much bigger, we need to actually account for that extra width by moving the brake caliper further out. And further, we probably even have to align this and center it appropriately so that way the brake pads are still fully seated around the rotor at all times. That way we get maximum stopping power. And we probably need to realign the brake lines as well, because with that alignment and adjustment out, it's probably going to interfere with the wheel. But why bother with any of that when I can just straight up replace the entire system from the lever all the way down to the caliper? I got the idea by comparing the RTR, again, to the Alpha Pro, which actually has big boy dirt bike brakes. Granted, the Alpha Pro has cheap Chinese versions of these, but with a bigger caliper, bigger pads, and more pistons, it is better. This is the caliper that I found that has the exact same spacing that I need, so it should be a direct fit. If you're doing this, make sure to look out for ones with 51 millimeter spacing in the bolts here, or just buy this exact one, link in the description. Unfortunately, when looking for this, I couldn't find a full kit that had this kind of spacing. I guess 51 millimeters is a bit uncommon, so I had to piecemeal it and add these two pieces. So I have a universal right hand brake lever and reservoir, and to pair it off, a black stainless steel braided brake line in between. And as a bonus, this brake caliper is already spaced out, so that should be able to take a 220 millimeter rotor. So let's throw the new rotor on and the new caliper to make sure that that's actually the case. Yep, looks like that's a perfect fit for 220 millimeters. You can see on the back side here where the pad is that it is fully on the rotor, and this spacing is perfect, so it's not kinked in any way down or up, anything like that, and it spins freely. We're off to a good start. But now we're not going to continue with this and building out the brake system and filling it with fluid and getting that all set up, because we have to go back to the issues with this supermoto setup. DIY supermoto issue number 2, and that is wheel alignment, as you can probably plainly see. In order for the brake rotor to properly align in the brake caliper and for nothing else to rub on this side, everything is shifted over so much so that you can see that it's really off center. See, this is the issue with running a rear wheel in the front, because this hub was meant to have both a rotor on one side and a chain on the other and a wide swing arm to go in between it. This is the brake rotor side, and as you can probably see, it sticks out quite a ways, and because it sticks out so much, that means that we need to account for that spacing by shoving the wheel further to the other side so that way it lines up appropriately. So the only thing that I can think of at this point to make this hack job even better is more hacking. Hope I don't regret that. And now, having done what you just saw multiple times over the last couple of days, I still hope I don't regret doing that. See, this was a classic do as I say, not as I do type scenario. What I was doing, of course, was shaving down the 4 points here that attach the brake rotor itself to the hub. That way it's set in a little bit more, it's closer to the sidewall here, and that way I can be able to shift the whole wheel over a little bit so it's at least a little bit more centered. And this, of course, meant I had to adjust the spacers. Previously, I had made spacers for this because there was nothing that I had got that would actually fit this, and probably for good reason. But now, because it was shifted over a little bit, one of them had to be smaller and the other one had to be larger. And thankfully, I actually had a bunch of different spacers laying around from this original project and found two that were exactly the same. Go figure, it looks like that was more of a traditional size spacing rather than this one here. So I basically took a couple of millimeters off on this end and added it to this end, so now it is at least a little bit more spaced out. I mean, if you really want to get technical, it is still not 100% spaced. Clearly you can see that with the fork guards there, but you know, that's as good as I'm gonna get this thing. But now that we got that other issue addressed, we can finally continue with the rest of this braking system. And at this point, that's basically just adding the stainless steel brake line, threading it from the caliper all the way up to the lever, and adding fluid. This whole front brake system is looking so much better already, but what's the point of adding all of this stuff if you can't use it? We need to add brake fluid as the last step to actually make it functional now that everything is properly torqued down. Now, you could just gravity feed that and squeeze that brake lever umpteen million times, but thankfully I have a tool for the job. I actually have a brake bleeder, which has this little pump right here, creates a vacuum so that way I can suck from the bottom and make sure that I have enough fluid in there so it fills the entire thing easily without adding any air bubbles. Makes the job a whole lot easier. Now, after all that, we can finally say we have a functional front brake. But we're not done yet because we want to show people that we're braking, and one of the ultimate reasons why I decided to replace this front brake entirely is because right under here. This right here is the key to a brake light, which unfortunately the Electro & Co kit doesn't have. It's a momentary switch where you can put in 2 wires on these little leads right here, and then when you squeeze the brake, it actually deploys this little plunger, and that connects the signal between the two, and you can actually light up a brake light. So now we're back to this fun little mess that we recently added under the seat. So I added 2 more wires that go up to that brake switch, this black one and green one, and we're gonna tie it into this whole system right here specifically so that we can make sure that the brake light functions as well as running lights. So this indistinguishable little cluster is all of the wires that come out of the light, because I mentioned previously that not only can it be a running light, but it has brake lights and turn signals. So after all that, with the tail light, we have these 3 wires which we haven't used yet, yellow, red, and green. Now, yellow and green are the 2 turn signals. Don't ask me which one goes to which side. I don't know. I don't care. It's the red one that we care about, the brake wire. So we're going to fix this brake wire to one of the 2 wires here going to the switch. So now I got one half of that. The black one is now tied to the red. In the taillight assembly, we just have this green wire to connect, but it matters where you connect this. So in this system with the DC to DC converter, one of the first things past this point is the switch. So that way I could be able to turn on and off the lights if I wanted to while I'm riding the bike. So if I plug this green wire into, say, the red wires down here in this little cluster, which gives positive to the taillight and the headlight after the switch, then the brake light's only gonna work if the switch is on and the lights are on. But I want this brake light to be working whether or not I have the lights actually on. So I need to put this before the switch, and basically the first thing in this, which is the yellow wire here, which provides 12 volts positive. So I'm just gonna break the connection that goes to the positive and splice in the green wire here so that way it's connected directly and I will have it on all the time. And now to see if everything worked, got the key here and we're gonna turn it on. So the headlight and tail light is turned on right now, but if I squeeze the brake lever, we have brakes. But now the ultimate test. If I turn off the headlight and tail light, does it still work? It does. Perfect. We can wrap it up.
And try it out at night appropriately. We're also gonna have to bed in the front, so we're gonna do a series of acceleration and slow but firm squeeze of the front. Feels pretty good so far. So I'm getting used to the brake feel as well. It feels a lot different than the Electro & Co brake. The Electro & Co levers are very on-off, so even like this rear one here, it's very bitey in one specific spot. But the rear is very gradual. It's, I don't want to say spongy necessarily, but it's a longer throw. It's a lot more tunable, dialable. But that is a little bit of a problem that I'm noticing right now, because unfortunately this doesn't have adjustments to the lever, and I think it's not far out enough for me, because if I squeeze it with just 2 fingers like I normally like to, I have to squeeze that thing almost all the way to the lever. So really I have to put all 4 fingers on that in order for it to be like really effective, you know, in really hard braking like this. So I don't know if some spacers on that to push it out a little bit would help. I think I can find something like that, so that might be something I do with this. And the alignment's better because I can ride with no hands. That was a problem earlier because the alignment of the wheel was so off. Yeah, you can kind of see it. It wants to pull to the right. I am having to fight it a little bit, but it's a lot better than what it was, trust me. But also, and probably more importantly, people can see me braking from behind. Pretty important on a street bike.
Overall, not bad. This is really improved, but like I mentioned with the brake feel, it could be better. And I did check the lines after the fact to see if there was any kind of lingering air bubbles in the system, but thankfully all good there. Which is unfortunate because the brake lever here is not adjustable, but I solved that already by adding a perch spacer. Adding a perch spacer, which is this little piece by the way, moves the entire assembly further away from the grip. That way I can be able to use this fully without my own hand getting in the way. I'm glad I had that laying around. Kinda. Sorry, CRF.
Bigger disc, bigger pie.